Welcome back to another episode of Sustainapod, a youth-led podcast for the youth and anyone passionate about sustainability across the world. My name is Rachel, and I'll be hosting today's episode of Green Careers mini-series. In this episode, we'll be looking into the field of urban town planning, which has been estimated to rise in demand as governments and businesses seek new and innovative solutions to complex global challenges such as climate change, industrial transformation, and the growth of metaverse. We are honored to have Chin Lam, an urban planner and a Hong Kong youth delegate at COP27 on today's episode. Chin is also the founder of the social media platform Urban Acupuncture Hong Kong, aiming to push the agenda of sustainable urbanism to the next generation of city shapers. Thank you for joining us today, Chin.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So to start off with, can you talk about your field of work as a urban town planner?
Okay, so I'm not sure if you've ever heard of or played the game SimCity.
Yeah.
It's basically like, well, the game SimCity, you're in the game, you have a plot of land, you choose where to build towers or residents and hospitals. It's kind of like that, but of course that's a game. But concept-wise, it's similar. In reality, of course, it's different, but you, as an urban planner, you have to understand the way to have residentials balancing with the good mix of supporting facilities, right? You can't just have residentials. You need hospital, schools, or like all those things as well. Basically, finding good balance as well as what's the most appropriate form of development suitable for your region or, I guess, climate. Like for Hong Kong, right? We're a coastal city. We have a lot of mountains. So we can't do like urban developments like Los Angeles, where they are completely flat. They can do an urban sprawl, we call it. In Hong Kong, we have high density buildings, and those we have to consider. So what's best, what's balanced for the region and the city, and it's people too, because the culture, habitat, lifestyle, people and animals are different. And so we have to take those into factors and combine it into a city.
Okay, so I think, were you inspired by SimCity to be an urban planner, or what other reasons were there?
I think the game definitely played a big part. I just really enjoyed creating things. But actually, when I chose my university course for bachelor's, it wasn't into urban planning first. It was more into, I'm still into it, but I'm more into design. I love using design concepts, how you have to empathize with your user. And then you have a problem, you create and brainstorm and then create a solution. Like I love those stuff, creating solutions for people, for the world. So I started studying spatial design at University of Arts London. People know it more as Central St. Martin's. And then from that course, there was a module called Future Cities. And that basically opened up my mind into more of the city models, especially starting from since post-World War II, 1950s or 1960s. After the war, there was a housing shortage, massive housing and development implementation, and how that resulted in concepts like garden city or modernist city. And were those good for people? Were those developments good or bad? And those are really interesting to me. And obviously, I was always into climate change. Like since learning it from primary school, I was thinking, wow, this is a huge problem. Why is no one talking about this? Why is no one doing anything about this? So those aspects were always in my mind and then combined together. And then so after that Future City module, I got really into how cities work, sustainable city, future cities, how would they look like? And then also, yeah, then got me into my master's, which I took spatial planning, also meaning urban planning / town planning. Just depends where you are from. You call it different term. But yeah, so that's how I ended up getting into this field.
I love how you talked about climate change and how nobody's trying to solve it. It's
Yeah.
actually kind of funny because right now they're trying to solve it, but they just say that, oh, this is such a huge problem, we have to solve it, but nobody actually does any concrete action. So I think your point was pretty valid about that.
When I was in primary school, like back then, there was not even Paris Agreement. It was Kyoto Protocol.
Oh,
Yeah. And 10 years and more ago, like, can you imagine? Like, no one talked about it. No one even knows what it is. Like nowadays, people know what it is. Whether
yeah.
they do something about it, then that's another question. Yeah.
I think it's more with the increasing awareness of climate change. So a lot of people like know this concept of sustainability, which leads on to the next question. Like as a urban planner, how do you incorporate sustainability into your work?
So in terms of urban planning, there are a lot of things that you can do, like creating or redeveloping a city. There's a lot of work. So you could either do hands-on, like if someone or an organization or a client wants to build something, you as a consultant can advise them how you should build, how the regulations and land uses limit things you want to build and what you need to be mindful of. For example, if it's in a sensitive location, a consultant can advise them what you can do or cannot do. Also, you could do things like research, right? Research or big scale planning. So just an example, in Hong Kong, there are Northern Metropolis plans and also the artificial islands or other stuff. It could be like research or kind of a top-down study. So in terms of sustainability, also more than like on top of consulting and research, you could actually like hands-on develop and brainstorm projects together and actually implement them in ground. So sustainability can be incorporated in those levels. So let's say if I'm doing the consulting part, I can encourage my client like, oh, you should add more social or environmental elements, like you have more parks or greeneries, green spaces for people, or can you have more renewable energy or solar panels on your roof, like stuff like that. And then, but obviously, the client might think, oh, what's in it for me? Then me as an urban planner, I might have to like think of a win-win situation. So I could say, oh, if you have this, it will be good for your, let's say, it would generate more people to come. Therefore, you could earn more money. So I think those aspects, I can try to fit in more sustainability. But obviously, you can research and study how you create a sustainable city as a whole. And then you can take forward those recommendations to policymakers or other local developers. And yeah, hands-on project that is even more easy in a way, like back into SimCities, right? So in hands-on developing projects, that's most easy. It comes back to the SimCities aspect again. Like you have an urban space, what elements do you put in? Then those I can put in whatever I think it's sustainable or green into the development project itself. So yeah, these are the different ways that I can incorporate sustainability in my work. I work as a planning consultant, but actually all those type of work I mentioned, I got to do as well. Like I could do research, I could help my clients with things, I can work on actual projects and developing projects together with architects or the community.
As you said, other than mainly doing consultant work, you also do like other stuff like researching or like doing hands-on projects. So do you think the things that you learned during your education in like bachelor's or master's has like helped you in this like kind of different role, like working?
Yeah, for sure. In my education side, I put like two aspects. Like one is the urban planner knowledge and skill, and the other would be the legal stuff. I'll explain later. I think from studying planning, you learn like what's good or bad, like in the past, what worked and what not. And so you take these experiences or what you've learned and you could apply it into your current work, or my current work, I should say. So, for example, like, okay, so like typical theory, like urban sprawling is bad. Like if you spread out your developments, like LA, like I mentioned, that in school we learned how that is bad for community, mental health, social interactions, and it's actually very energy, like you consume a lot of energy through those type of developments. And with those kind of knowledge, then we could then apply those knowledge into our work. So we could form more communities, which we think it's good. So either you have a balanced open space, places that allow social engagements. Oh, and also like a street, right? A street, you think it's just a street, but no, there are so much elements to a street, right? If there are shops on the side, those contribute to what's a safe street or not. And so like we learned those theories, and then we can apply it to our current or upcoming projects. Then we could recommend like, oh, actually to make that neighborhood safer, you need some on-street shops on the side and not just a blank wall and those stuff like that. And so the second part, the legal knowledge, different cities and different countries have their own planning system. You can imagine Hong Kong, it will be different to UK, London, and Canada and US, Australia. They all are different and have their own system.
Okay, so moving on to the next question, what has been the biggest challenge in your field of work and how did you manage to overcome?
I can think of one instance where I had to represent my client, which was, let's say, a developer. And I had to represent them as a developer. So I had to put into a mindset as a developer and go into a public consultation with the government. And to me, that was hard because, well, that was the first time. Maybe it's easier now, but back then it was the first time me doing this job, like me representing them. And it was hard to get into their mindset. From training, and I guess from me as a person or a planner, I think of more the community benefits, sustainable developments in general. How do you get the most for most people? Whereas typical, it might be a bit stereotyping, but typically developers would then prioritize economic side more. And I think that was hard for me to be in their place, yet producing, I'd say, more beneficial comments. But the lesson I learned is that, I think I mentioned earlier, as long as you find a win-win situation that would benefit them and that could bring sustainable developments, then those are good points. And those were basically what I did. I think one more thing I want to share, another challenge in my field of work is, imagine you're planning for the whole city. There are so many stakeholders, so many types of places, developments, people. You will never have 100% satisfaction. No matter how much you try, no matter how much consultation you do, no matter how much you compromise, there's always going to be someone who benefits less or more. And I think that's always difficult for me. And sometimes the issue of ethicality, right? Urban renewal. Buildings are really old, or places are really old infrastructure. You need to upgrade or else it could be catastrophic. But in the same time, you may have to change the community or potentially push people away. So like these things, I think I'll never have an answer to, and I'll always be thinking about what's good or bad. And yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge for me in my field.
So you often think feel these kind of dilemmas, and I think is that something that a lot of people don't know, that like your work as a consultant actually consists of these considerations, like of different stakeholders and such?
I think so. Maybe, well, I'm guessing how people perceive planners or development professionals is that we are we are proposing developments just one-sided for the benefit of developing. But actually, yeah, like for each case, there are so much considerations, and it's hard, I think, to balance these.
Well, I guess it is very hard to kind of weigh different opinions because you sometimes have to give up something to gain something. So let's move on to the next question. And So during your time as a urban planner, can you think of any highlights in your career?
One of the highlights I have in terms of the work, urban planning, I think was when it was a project that I've been working on for a year and a half. It took a lot of rounds of developments. The case was rejected at first, but then we kept developing. We kept taking into consideration comments from town planning board members, the public. And in that project in particular, I tried as much as possible to encourage the addition of more sustainable elements. It took a long time. It was a stressful period. And I think the highlight was that it was approved, right? Like it was a very happy celebration. Everyone was happy. And it was something that we all believed in, no matter if it's us, the architects or the clients, and even at the end, the town planning board. So we thought we hit the mark and tried to balance or maximize all the different considerations. Other than that, I'd say the opportunity to go to a conference of parties, which is the United Nations Climate Change Conference, was one of my highlights. Although that wasn't part of my full-time job, but from there, I interlinked a lot of planning and climate change things, and I tried to put them together. And so, yeah, that was another highlight too.
I like the fact that you talked about how not just you, but also other people, like your clients as well, that really like wanted sustainability to happen within our society. So, do you think teamwork is one of your most important skill set, or like do you have another skill that you have in mind?
Oh, that's a good question. I think teamwork is definitely one of or if not the most important, because for a huge development project or as a city scale, you have to work with so many people, even if it's technical side. So you have engineers, architects, people, right? They look into detail, like drainage, through everything, but also the stakeholders, like who lives there, who doesn't, when you do public engagement. So teamwork, how you communicate with people is very important. And also you have to always be open-minded, because there are so much considerations, and sometimes it's difficult to just focus, like have a tunnel vision, but always keep an open mind. I think that would be best to achieve a great outcome. Yeah.
You mentioned something about being open-minded, and I feel like even though a lot of, I think the younger generation is very open about like the concept of like sustainability, but when it
Mm.
comes to their parents, sometimes they don't care that much, or it's either that they don't really know much about it, so they don't really encourage their children to get into this field. So do you think you can give some advice for like the younger generation on how to like maybe try to get into the field of sustainability, or like maybe just your job as a urban planner? Like there's some encouraging words so like they can kind of decide on, oh, if this is like a good job aspect for me.
I think an advice I would give them is that it is difficult, like not only because of relationship with parents, but they have expectations and you don't want to disappoint them. I understand, but at the same time, I think they would be happy to see that what you're doing is happy and that you're passionate as well. And I think most importantly, just stick with what makes you happy and what you believe is right, even if your parents might not support, because those are the things that will really fuel you in your career or in your future. Those are the long lasting impacts. And I think by thinking of those aspects, you will never regret your choices. Whereas if you, like, let's say, listen to your parents, you might later think, I should have done that. I should have done that. But I'd also say keep an open mind, right? Like, choosing either path is not set for good. You could always shift or change. Even if you thought you decided on one thing, things come and go, and then you learn more in the way, and you could always change. Like there's no set path. You could create whatever you want, but most importantly, just stick with what makes you most happy and passionate, and what's good for the community.
Yeah, that was really like nice to hear, especially how like you don't have to be like, if I want to go into that field, I have to stick to that road.
Mm,
Because I feel like a lot of people don't think they can change their path or mindset that easily. So that's something that I think I would also take into
yeah.
consideration.
I think when I was finishing secondary school, I was at that stage too, right? I was thinking, oh, I need to make the right decision, choose the right uni course, right? But then now, if I'm giving advice to me or my 18-year-old me, I would say it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like I've been staying in the same category with my same principles, but the exact thing have changed
Mm.
many times, and it's great. Yeah, never regret it.
Well, that's really nice. So now I think that's all that we can ask for your work as a urban town planner. So I want to ask you about something outside of your work. So I see that you're also involved in like carbon care InnoLab, and you
Mm.
also mentioned that you had a chance to attend COP27 last year. So what do you think were your key learning outcomes from that conference you
I don't think I can ever summarize what I've learned or
had?
experienced at COP27 in a sentence or in a paragraph. But of course, I got to learn about and experience the actual international negotiation for climate change, which was crazy. 193 parties from all over the world gathered in the same place for 2 weeks. That was crazy enough. And but the other aspects, I think I had opportunities and learned so much about cultures and countries which were suffering from climate change that, like, if I haven't had the chance to go, I would never have learned. For example, I've met friends from the Brazilian Amazon forest, indigenous people, same as people from the Pacific Islands, where their countries are sinking, and you learn their firsthand stories and their problems and what they're doing, which you would never learn about in, let's say, Hong Kong or in my circle if I haven't been. So other than that, in terms of town planning, I think I learned a lot about climate adaptation too. And in Hong Kong, we so far prioritized a lot on mitigation planning, how to reduce carbon output, but adaptation, how you prepare for climate disasters or impacts, we don't have as much yet. Even if we do, like, okay, drainage and landslide, those we've done really good at in Hong Kong. But in terms of heat and maybe in future sea level rise, coastal flooding, those are less. And also I learned a lot about nature-based solution, which I've never heard of previously. Instead of using hard infrastructure like seawalls, can we use things like mangroves or oyster reefs? And through COP, I've learned what other countries or cities are doing in terms of climate adaptation and some nature-based solutions that they used.
So I think from COP, like from my viewpoint, after hearing what you said, it's really unique and like I don't think I'll ever be able to attend one, but like hearing you say that, it makes me feel like actually you can learn like a lot of different things that you can't really learn in your daily life. Like even though I attend like an international school and meet like
Mm,
different like peoples from different culture, you might not be able to know indigenous people. Like you
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, that talks about like their first hand stories and such. So that was really interesting for me since I thought like these kind of conferences were so like always very stiff and like serious. So I was pretty surprised that you had like small talks with other people. So that was
Oh
really
yeah.
interesting.
Because it was a 2 weeks conference. So
Uh,
although yes, there are also the stiff negotiation conferences. But actually, you'd be surprised on the other things that what happens in pavilions, the types of protests. There's people dressed up as dinosaurs to
oh,
award Fossil of the Day award to the worst country contributing to climate change. There are people dressed up as cows dancing to encourage people to go vegan, like it, because it's so stiff, because everyone's so tired for 2 weeks. I think those were like good refreshers for people just to have a break.
Yeah.
But yeah, so COP27 could be a whole nother podcast, so I'll just stop there.
That's very witty of them to dress up as different costumes and like just play around. Yeah. So I think you also mentioned something about like nature-based solutions. So I also saw your like work with urban acupuncture like on your social media. And I saw a post where you said the use of solar panels on like pedestrian crossings, and one they can like shelter from the sun, and also you can use like solar panels to like
Mm.
collect energy. And I thought that was really smart because you're basically killing two birds in one stone, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, that was really smart. Like, so can you talk more about your idea and where it came from?
Okay, so the solar panel and a shade um, solution is not one of the nature-based solutions. So nature-based solution is when you use natural resources to combat like either mitigation or adaptation. But that and what I shared in urban acupuncture, I always have these ideas, random ideas or design or solution ideas whenever I go somewhere.
Mhm.
And the reason I created this platform was that I have these ideas or things I process while walking down the street, and I want to share it with the world. Hence, I created this platform. And that solar panel shading was one of the ideas. It was last summer. I was walking in some Sherpo, super hot, one of those extreme heat days. I was on that crossing island and thinking, wow, the sun is blazing down. Huge potential for solar panels. And if there could be shade, it would help me out in cooling. I didn't have an umbrella. People around me did. And so I was thinking, oh, that is a killing two birds with one stone solution. And so I drew that up and then put it into urban acupuncture. Yeah, I have other ideas as well in the back of my head. I should post those soon as well.
That's actually very smart. I love how like these just random creative ideas come like just randomly when you're probably just like walking down the street and
Yeah,
ah, this would be like a good idea to like
it's
implement.
a good and bad thing.
Yeah.
I love how these creative solutions come, but sometimes my brain gets so tired. Like it's hard to take a rest. Yeah.
Okay, so we currently only have time for one last question. So to wrap it up, let's talk about like your future aspiration. So what are your own personal career aspirations for the future as an urban planner?
Mm. I think this kind of comes back to how I would advise young people who are choosing their career paths and how things are constantly changing. After being a planner for almost 4 years now, full time, I still love my job and the interest, but I would want to learn more about policy because everything I do, it's great how I'm at the local level where I'm implementing projects. But then also at the same time, a lot are constricted from policies, which are often wider or a higher level. And setting policies or what's good or bad, I don't know much about it. So maybe in the future, more study. I'd love to study. If someone can pay me to study forever, I'd love that. But yeah, maybe studying more about urban policy. Of course, stay in touch with the urban and climate change things, but also would be interested in trying and working in a think tank like thing, because I think it's a great balance of research and local application and implementation. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think we don't like our whole life we just spent learning new stuff. Like I don't think there's gonna be a point where we know everything. So
No.
yeah.
I think ignorance is bliss is actually a good phrase because sometimes the more I learn, the more I feel like I don't know. And the
Oh yeah,
more,
true.
yeah, and the more considerations in my head. But still, I'm still curious and love to learn about a lot of things.
I think that's a really good factor into like building up your future like prospects. So that's really nice. So yeah, thank you, Chin Chin, for joining us today. And thank you, Sustainapod listeners, for tuning in this week with us. As always, we would love to hear from you about this episode. So let us know any questions or comments by messaging us on Instagram at sustainapod_GIH or email us at sustainapod@gmail.com. And see you next time.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you.